Following his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea, Prime Minister Mark Carney says he is ready to rebuild that relationship, but he acknowledged some of the thorny issues standing in the way.
We had a discussion on foreign interference. We had a discussion on a range of other issues, recognizing that setting it back on track, particularly on the economic side, was an important part of the discussion.
Carney says he has accepted the Chinese president's invitation for a state visit, but no date has yet been set for that trip. Joining us to analyze that meeting and the trip as a whole is Veena Najibullah, the Vice President of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Welcome to your morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation.
The Prime Minister went into this trip and that meeting with China's president when our relations between these two countries are at a low, one that's been descending since we arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Do you think that this meeting put a change in our relationship with China moving forward?
It was definitely a turning point. It will take some time to rebuild that relationship, but the Prime Minister has made it clear that he wants to explore areas where we can do more with China. Of course, I think we have to proceed with caution. A lot of the challenges that have existed in the relationship with the Chinese Communist Party are still there with respect to foreign interference, national security concerns, economic security concerns. So dialogue is important. It's good to have high-level discussions with China, but we have to have realistic expectations and proceed with caution.
Yeah, dialogue is one thing, relationship is another. Mark Carney was not the only leader who had one-on-one FaceTime with the Chinese president. We know that U.S. President Donald Trump also met with him. He characterized that meeting as amazing and a 12 out of 10. How does Trump's relationship with Xi impact Canada?
Absolutely. So what we saw in that meeting, which was much anticipated between President Trump and Chairman Xi, is that there's probably the best way to describe it is they now have a pause, a temporary truce in that relationship and the trade war and in the competition that was ongoing. But of course, again, with the U.S. and China, there are also many relationship challenges. But for now, there seems to be some agreement on ways to move forward on soybeans. So China will be buying more American soybeans. They will try to cooperate a little bit more on fentanyl. As a result, the U.S. has reduced tariffs on China and also has paused some of the export restrictions on semiconductors and other technologies. So basically, there is a pause now in the trade war in that relationship, but there will be many challenges because there are many structural issues between China and the U.S., which will likely flare up again in the foreseeable future.
Canada's meeting with the Chinese president was already going to be a delicate minefield to walk through. Then you add to that, during that trip, our trade negotiations with the U.S. shut down. Canada wants to see China drop its tariffs on canola products. That's going to require Ottawa to drop its own tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. We know this, but that's something the United States is against. So set this up for us. How does the Prime Minister improve our relationship with China without drawing the ire of Trump?
Absolutely. It's not going to be easy, Anne-Marie. You've laid out the challenge. Whatever we do with China, we have to sequence and triangulate in a way that does not negatively impact our negotiations with the U.S. U.S. remains our most important economic and security partner. We need to stabilize that relationship. And of course, there are things that we can do with China on trade. So perhaps more that we can sell to them on energy, in particular LNG and oil. But that relationship is going to take time to rebuild. And we do need to sequence whatever we do on EVs with what we're doing with the U.S. So there's going to be no easy or quick solutions, but both Prime Minister Carney and President Xi noted that they have instructed their officials to continue discussions and negotiations. So this will take some time. I think what they'll try to do is move forward on easier, so to speak, issues rather than on EVs, which will likely need to be considered as part of a broader discussion on Canada's auto sector and our negotiations with the U.S.
Really quickly, on Sunday, Canada signed a defense pact with the Philippines specifically aimed at deterring aggression from China. So then how will that factor into any future meetings the Prime Minister has with the Chinese president?
That was a landmark agreement. In fact, I'm speaking to you from Manila, where this agreement was signed yesterday, and it's the first of its kind. We've never had an agreement like this, a visiting forces agreement with a non-NATO country. So the first one in Southeast Asia, the first one in the Indo-Pacific. I wouldn't frame it as necessarily only dealing with China. Obviously, Philippines is having many issues in the South China Sea with respect to China's claims. But it's also about upholding rules-based order, international law. It's a commitment to do more with the Philippines in all areas, not just in trade, but also on defense and security. And I think, Anne-Marie, that is one key issue that we should be looking at in terms of Prime Minister Carney's trip to Asia writ large. Yes, trade diversification was kind of the headline news, but we saw deepening of security relations with Korea, as well as with the Philippines, and discussions with Japan and others on Canada being a stakeholder in peace and stability in the region, so that we could, in fact, do more trade together, right? Because without stability, economic prosperity is going to be harder to achieve. So I think what we're doing with Philippines, what we're doing with Korea is relevant, and that has to continue for us to be seen as a serious partner in the region.
Trade relationships on the back of defense and security. Thank you, Veena Najibullah, Vice President of Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. We'll be right back.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.